When Carter became president, guess what happened? He largely kicked out MBO as the government budgeting favorite and brought with him this approach called zero-based budgeting, right? ZBB. Zero-based budgeting, in theory, is starting from zero for every budget year. In theory, as I construct, as you construct this next budget, we're going to wipe the slate clean, and we're simply going to start looking at particular programs and what they cost, and we're going to make decisions about which programs we want to sponsor, and we're going to carry with them those costs, and we'll build from zero up to as much money as we think we're going to have to spend. Now, what many times you do with the zero-based budgeting, and this is where this becomes important still today, is when you're looking particularly at possible revenue shortfalls, you're anticipating a crisis, you may be tasked with actually submitting not one budget, but several budgets, variations. So you come in at a 100% budget. And frequently what it's going to be is this. Right? Remember the budget as an historical document? You might likely be told you're expected to come in at exactly the same amount as you came in last year. 100% budget. That is, don't go one penny beyond what was authorized for you, given to you for this year's operation. And in addition to that, you will also provide 2, maybe 3 variations on that. You will be permitted to come in, for example, these are not hard and fast, but these are kind of common, at 103%. Come with a budget that totals 103% of what you have right now. That's nice to hear. Frequently, that's simply part of a kind of a Dale Carnegie approach to giving you the bad news. Because in addition to your 103% budget, you're also expected to come in with a 97% budget and a 92% budget. Okay?
And they may add more services to provide within that budget.
That's a possibility as well. That's a possibility as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But see, the thing with the zero-based budgeting is that the programming is kind of largely left to you with regard to this very real, very common almost bastardization of it. It's the amounts that drive decisions about programming. So now if you're required to come in at 97%, you've got to look at, in theory, at these nice little distinct packages of programs and the amount that each of them carries with it to decide what you're going to include in your 97% budget. But you know what that really means? What it is that you're going to exclude. What it is you're going to exclude. And when you're building the zero-based budget, you might have a particular program. Let's say that it's a day camping program for at-risk youth. Okay? And you want to do that. So you come in with the basic day camping program that's going to serve 100 kids and give each of them 2 weeks in a camp. That's your basic one. Fine. You've got an amount of money that you anticipate for that. That gets written down in the appropriate columns. Now, on a 103 budget, what you might say is, you know something? For some additional amount of money, an additional $20,000, we can expand this program to reach not 100 kids, but 150 kids. Or we might have this for 100 kids instead of 2 weeks for 3. So you know what you might do? You keep the basic program as written, and then as one of the options, you have Addition A to the day camping program. This is going to cost $20,000. It's an additional 50 kids for 2 weeks. So if you're building a 103% budget, there might be a number of those add-ons that you now include that gets you up to the 103% value for the total amount. Or what you might do is begin to parse off certain elements of programs. Instead of eliminating entire programs for your 97% budget or your 92% budget, you might now reframe budgets so that for 93% of the amount, you're only going to serve a certain 93% of the clients, or you're only going to provide them with 93% of the services, or whatever. Those are options that you have under zero-based budgeting in reality. But to think of those solely as technical decisions and not as also political decisions would be unwise in the extreme. Which are the programs that support your most politically active clientele? It's probably something you're going to want to think about. What are the programs that are closest to the traditional heart and goals of your agency and its heritage? That's probably something that you're going to be thinking about. What are the programs that are poised to take advantage of changes that are occurring in the social, the political, or the economic environment? What are the programs that are position your agency best to take advantage of opportunities that might be out there that might be very, very different than in the past? You would be wise to be thinking about those things as well.
So is the person that's making the budget decisions also making program decisions and how that budget is going to affect the people actually providing the services?
The answer is sometimes yes, deliberately. Sometimes not deliberately, but in effect, yes. Sometimes the person who's making those budget decisions is making decisions on the basis of money solely, or political realities that are associated with money. That's more likely, but without in-depth knowledge of the impact it's going to have on programs, on clients, and others.
That's what we experience in state government.
Of course you do.
Is that the budget, whoever's driving the budget bus has no clue how the decisions, their decisions with budgeting affect those of us, or even the policy that drives those of us that are in the field. For example, we have a policy that says every child that has a CPS case must have a picture in the file. That worker has to take a picture. They're not allowed to use their own cameras or take them on their cell phones, and yet we don't have the budget available to make sure everybody has a camera. So that's where when the person that's doing the budgeting is not also involved in program planning, that can be disastrous.
Yeah, it certainly can be. And it's one of the reasons why the politics of budgeting can reach down as far as it does in an agency. It's why all of you are likely to be involved in a variety of ways in the budgeting process as you're out there at your work, or as you're going to go out there in work. It's also a reality, isn't it, that there's a concept that comes out of Herbert Simon is the one that also came up with satisficing, that term. And he comes up with this notion of called bounded rationality. Bounded rationality. I love this concept. Remember Weber? Now Weber's a real bright guy. So he didn't really believe that bureaucracies were just rational the way his ideal type describes. But the notion of bounded rationality is as offered by Simon is that we're limited as human beings in our ability to process information. We're limited in our perceptions and biased. We're limited in the way we think about and analyze problems and biased. Right? So we're not only limited, but we're also biased. Now, why should legislators, or why should members in the private sector of a board of directors be any more rational, right, than human beings are or can be? Right? Well, obviously they can't. And so while there's a wide variety of the way rationality is expressed, there are limits to all of those expressions. And if we're talking about state government with a state budget, just think of how many thousands of programs, human services, public safety, business, transportation, agriculture, politics, blah, 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 on and on and on, we're really talking about. And legislators who are consumed, caught up with a subset of issues that are particularly special to them and spend an inordinate amount of time on those. So for them to have that kind of in-depth programmatic wisdom that you're talking about, probably not going to happen except in very, very few cases. So the ability of your organizational champions to advocate, to communicate for that, and to call on constituencies to bring their influence to bear becomes very important, even in the budgeting process. Because what is the budgeting process? Is it a technical enterprise solely, or is it a political enterprise? It's a political enterprise. It involves technical and programmatic features, but it's still a political thing. And that's even true whether you're talking about a small private sector or if you're talking about major public sector. Okay. Now, we've talked about cost-benefit analysis. We've talked about cost-effectiveness analysis. Okay. Want to emphasize this as well. Now, the analysis is a multi-year analysis in both cost-benefit and cost-effectiveness analysis. Let's say you've got a program that you intend to run for 4 years. In general, why not just look at the first year costs and the first year benefits?
More costs.
What's that?
If it's your first year, you have more costs.
Yeah, because all of your startup costs get rolled up into the first year. And the startup costs are not going to be part of the second, third, and fourth year. And frequently, not only will the costs be higher than in your first year, but your outcomes are more likely to be more limited because it's going to take a while to get things rolling. So even if you're in manufacturing, let's say it takes you 4 months to set up shop, that leaves you only with 8 months to produce. So you have additional startup costs that you're not going to have in later years, and you've really had a much shorter production year than you're going to have in any of the other years. So the idea here is don't ignore those additional costs. Don't ignore a diminished return for the first year, right? But simply average those things out, both in terms of costs and outcomes, over a multi-year period of time. And usually it's going to be, again, if it's shorter than 5 years, then you're usually talking about the lifespan of the program. And if it's longer than 5 years, you generally don't do this for longer than 5 to 7 years. Again, cost-benefit analysis, output expressed in dollar amounts, few externalities, few things that are regarded as incapable of some kind of assignment of a dollar value. Cost-effectiveness analysis, output expressed qualitatively, but counted. Number of units effectively produced. And with the overriding rationale of a cost-effectiveness approach is that there are so many externalities, many of which are absolutely central to that which is to be produced or to the values, let's say, of the agency, of a community, of a profession, that the output defies a dollar or simply a strictly quantitative expression. So we can talk about effectiveness, we talk about efficiency, and we can talk about benefit here. I want you to consider 3 programs. Providing clinical services to people with mental disorders. Okay? A, B, and C. Now let's define our outcomes, the intended goal of each of these programs as clients successfully served. And program A results in 100 individuals successfully served through that program. Program B, 150. Now, the actual therapeutic program may be different. I'm not assuming that they're the same programs here across 2 different or 3 different localities. They may be very different kind of programs, but each with the same fundamental goal. And notice here that program C results in 200 individuals successfully treated. Now, just on the face of it, which looks like the best program? C. From our perspective, sure looks like that's the best program, doesn't it? Okay. Let's look at the cost. In this hypothetical example, program A cost $1 million. And remember what we do when we're computing the cost for the program. We're using the same multi-year perspective that we've used to identify the number of units successfully produced here, the number of output. We're using that same interval to identify anything that cost us $1 or more to create the program. So it's recruiting for people, training for people, rental of a facility, purchase of equipment, furniture, supplies, computers, electricity, drinking water, on and on, travel, on and on and on and on. Anything that costs us $1. All sum, that results in $1 million of computed costs for program A. 1.75 or 1.75 million for program B, and $2 million for program C. Okay? Any impression as to what looks like the best program now? What kind of assessment can you begin to make? Not a conclusion, but just what you're thinking now as you're looking across these programs.
Well, wouldn't program B be 1.5 million if you were looking at equal delineation in the numbers of the dollar amount?
Could actually be different programs. I mean, very different types of program, and the one program, for whatever reason, doesn't have the same kind of economy of scale, for example, that program C has, and is much more expensive than program A, but oh yeah, yields a more impressive output.
Other than B, they're basically the same.
Yeah, A and C look to be about equally efficient, don't they? Which is the more effective one?
C.
C is still more effective, isn't it? By a matter of 100%. Of course, it's also more expensive, even though it's more effective. It's no more efficient than A. Is it more effective than B? It's 200 more than 150. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Is it more efficient than B? Yeah, it is as well. You know, eyeball math would say that. Now, enter an effort at cost-benefit analysis. Somebody comes up with a way that they claim and can convince, in a political environment, other individuals that they have a way of expressing in dollar amounts what the benefits are of those for A, 100 individuals successfully treated, B, for those 150 people successfully treated, and C, for those 200 people successfully treated. So in order, we've got $3 million of benefits computed, $5 million of benefits computed, and $6 million of benefits computed. What you're thinking now, what are some observations you might want to make about the value to your organization or the value to society across these three programs?
B. I would say C is still the best program.
You say C is still the best program. Now, what's your rationale for that?
Well, you have more clients successfully served, and as far as your cost versus your benefits, you get more money back out of C, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Am I understanding?
Yeah, you're understanding it right. Yeah, you're getting $3 million more out of C in terms of benefits for $1 million more invested in that particular program. The efficiency of A compared to the efficiency of C is the same, isn't it? For every $1 in, you're getting $3 back in terms of benefits. But the amount that you're getting back by way of societal benefits under a cost-benefit analysis for Program C is $3 million more than Program A at a cost of only $1 million more invested in it. Same efficiencies, but a somewhat significantly different total amount of benefits. Notice what's happening here? We're asking questions about which program is more effective. We're asking programs about which program is more efficient. We're asking questions about which program maximizes benefits to society or a particular constituency. Depending upon the question we ask, we're likely to come up with different perceptions, different valuations of what's a preferred program. Do you think there might be some politics involved in which questions you ask of different kind of budget actors, different kind of agencies? Mm-hmm. And look at this. We haven't done anything more than basic arithmetic involved, have we? You didn't have to have an accounting degree to go through this little exercise and begin to appreciate that numbers can be used by people in a political environment that are going to have profound impact upon potential clients, upon the health and vitality of communities. Now, we've talked about and I've identified line item budgets, program budgets, and performance budgets. Okay. I want to mention that there's a thing called crosswalks. Crosswalks are simply fairly detailed instructions that guide you from one kind of budget to the other, that guide you from one line item, perhaps, to a particular item on a program budget or on a performance budget, so that when you have both of them together, along with the crosswalk, the kind of skeleton key or guide, the Garmin, if you will, of budgeting, you can find your way from one document, one budget document, to another and know, oh, that's where that money comes from. That's how it's being spent. What? Did somebody say, well, what's an example of a line item budget? Is that what I heard, Vanessa? Well, you happen to have an example of a line item budget, the library budget that I've referred to in the past. And again, notice we've got personnel costs here. We know what the director is making, right? We've got one director there. We know what the support staff is making. We don't know how many support staff there are, though, do we? I'm really hoping that there's only one at that amount of money. You know? My gosh, if there are 5 of them. Anyway, so we know what the total personnel costs are. Now, what are these operating expenses? Okay, well, we know how much money has been authorized here for audio and visual, for books, for cleaning supplies, for computer supplies, for electricity, etc. Now, depending upon the organization and its rules, you may be able to move money from one item to another, from one line item to another. So it might be possible, for example, to take some out of that $100 that was at the beginning balance for cleaning supplies. You could move, let's say, $50 into computer supplies to bump that up to $250. That may be entirely possible for you to do. Now, the chances are, though, that you're not going to be able to do that in a line item budget across all items. The whole rationale behind a line item is to restrain and constrain the choices that are made for you as the budget manager. So, for example, could you move money from support staff personnel costs down to cleaning supplies? Chances are no. So the rule might be that within a major category, you can shift any amount of money from one line item to another. But you may not move a single penny across major line categories. That would be a very, very conventional kind of rule. Now again, notice that tells us how much money we have to work with. It tells us how we might be able to spend that money for particular items. But it doesn't tell us anything about whether books, for example, are going to be devoted primarily to a children's library, to reference library, to fiction, to nonfiction, to archives, or anything like that. So what we might have although this isn't a library budget, you might have a program budget. And the program budget might be designed specifically, a single program budget for each of those different identified programs. So for children's programming, a single program budget that would draw a certain amount of money from, if you will, the line item budget, or from the budget as expressed in a line item. So where we have books here at $10,000, let's say we've got 5 different library programs: children's, archives, fiction, nonfiction, reference. All right? Each one of which is going to require some expenditure from the books line item. The one thing we can be sure of is that we better not come in, once we add up books across those 5 program budgets, even a single penny above $10,000. Unless we're given the opportunity to draw, to move some of this money around, in which case we need to come up with a budget document that would show that. We've moved some money around. These are the new line items we have, and oh, now guess what? The crosswalk shows us that we're taking $5,000 and we're devoting it to, oh, the $5,000 we have in books for the children's library program, which leaves us $5,000 for the other 4, which may be divided by equally by 4, so we come up with $1,250 that goes into each of those other 4 programs for books, and we have a crosswalk that shows that. That's the way you take the line item budget, you translate it into specific program budgets. It's also why, if this, as a new board member, is what you're given, here's our budget. This shows what we originally started with. This shows how much we've already spent. This shows what we have left. This shows whatever we've moved around, so where the budget categories are right now. If that's all you've gotten, is it any surprise that it's going to be difficult for you to make sense of it unless you have the other information available to you? If you have the other information available to you, is it a Gordian knot? Is it something that you can't untie? Is it something you can't master? No, it isn't. It's nothing that you can't master if you're simply given sufficient information and sufficient time to digest the information. If you've been on a board of directors, or if you've been active in an agency's budgeting process for a number of years, you acquire that with the effort that you put into it and with time. We're winding down now, folks. We're winding down. More about budget. What should you know? Well, here's a typical sequence that takes place in a budget year, or any of these things is likely to take place within a year, and all of these things take place within the lifespan of a budget. So it starts with preparing and distributing a budget calendar. Somebody who's in charge of the budgeting process creates a calendar of activities, products that are required, and due dates. Who's responsible for them? And that goes out to all of the people who are going to be critical players in the preparation of a budget. Right? So you get the budget calendar. At some point, the budget call occurs. This is the specific instructions that go out to people who are going to be participating in creating a budget that tells you what you're to do. So, for example, and I guess I can say I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate to have been in one of those situations where I've been tasked to submit a budget request at 100%, 103, 97, and I think it was 95 or something like that. Okay? So now you're getting your instructions, and they're telling you what forms to use. You have to use these forms. You can have no more narrative than 10 pages or whatever, all those particular instructions. Now, in a public environment, that stuff will largely start with the executive, let's say with the governor or a mayor or something like that. And then the different agencies kick in. And they create their own agency calls. Right? It's starting to trickle downhill now. Right? So now you've got the variety of people in the agencies involved in this. At some point, there will be budget reviews. There will probably be hearings, or there'll be discussions between supervisors and subordinates asking for money, asking for support. Now, if you're going to be involved in a budget hearing, and those are really interesting, that's where you make your case, submitted your paperwork ahead of time. Now you come in to answer questions, to play the game. Many agencies in the human service environment, that's when they roll out their clients. I have real issues about that from an ethical perspective. You know? But by gosh, if you've got little kids that serve your agency, nothing will melt the heart of a legislator more than a little kid with a runny nose who says something real sweet about your agency and about your program. People will fawn all over them and want their pictures taken for the local paper. There'll be budget hearings. The thing about it is, rehearsing the budget hearing is very important. Rehearsing it is very important. Doesn't mean that you have to have a script, although I've seen people who've done that kind of thing. I mean, they even had it when the little kids would come out and what they'd say and all kind of stuff. Still, people wanted to have their pictures taken with them, but it was kind of sickening. But it's real important for you to come off as knowledgeable, be prepared for questions, even some obscure ones. Have a strategy in mind about how you're going to respond to questions that you're not going to be able to anticipate. Well, what happens if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? How am I going to respond to that? Right? Have a plan for that. Right? Gee, sir, I don't know the answer to that, but I can provide you with a very specific answer within 24 hours. That might be your plan. That might be your plan. In the public arena, this is probably good news in the private arena too. Don't alienate people in the process of trying to make your case. Right? So here we are in social workers, we're concerned with Title IV-E here, right? But if we were a representative or if we were an actor in favor of the continuation of the Title IV-E training program, probably wouldn't be a good idea for us to show up at the legislative budget hearing and begin to call the governor bad names or say that the commissioner of DCS doesn't know what she's doing. Right? Now, you can have those feelings privately, and I'm not saying that I do. Nobody here is saying that. Nobody, right? But the fact is that the people who are involved in a budget hearing understand the realities and the politics of the hearing. They can appreciate that you're going to have a variety of personal and professionally related feelings, but it's important for you to know what the context is so that you can exercise the professional use of self. At some point, particularly in a public sector, there'll be the submission of the executive's budget message, a rationale for the priorities and for the key decisions that have been made. And at some point in time, it will all have to come down to decisions as the legislature deliberates and then makes a decision. Now, when the budget then becomes adopted, I want to distinguish in the public sector between authorization and appropriations. They're two different things. An authorization in public budgeting is essentially a law that creates a ceiling above which money may not be spent for a particular activity. You hear what I'm saying now? It creates a ceiling. You're authorized $2 million for this particular program under the authorization. When what was originally aid to dependent children was created under the Social Security initiatives in the 1930s, money was authorized. But for the first several years, not one penny was appropriated. Because in addition to authorizations, there's an appropriations bill that needs to be passed. Now, the appropriations bill is law that actually assigns money to particular categories of a budget up to the legal authorization. But the amount of money that could be assigned can be zero. So you can be authorized a certain level of money for your program under the public budgeting process and yet not receive a single penny for it because you lose out in the appropriations battle. Okay. So authorization is important because if you can't get enough money to do what you need to do, you can lose it right away by having too low an authorization or not getting on that bill at all. But even if you've won that battle, it's only half the battle. Maybe it's only a third, because you still have to have the money appropriated in a separate budget process that takes place almost immediately. Now, when that's all adopted, when you have the authorization, you have the appropriations bills passed, then you get involved in budget administration. At some point in time, you're given a budget. I've worked at places, I'm not mentioning the institution where this happens. I'm not mentioning the institution where this happens, where you're given your budget several months into the budget year. That's awkward. Okay? And at the end of the budget year, and for months, maybe even years thereafter, there's the, oh, you can't see it down here. I don't know if this is going to be on the video. There you go. Audit and evaluation. Right? So then, this is where the bookkeeping and the accountancy comes into play. Okay? Now, it will come back into a political arena quite quickly when actors, and you may be one of these, has to then explain what it is that you achieved in that budget year. Why you maybe didn't achieve all that you had promised or hoped to achieve. How you're going to be able to do it in the future. And why it is that you need just a little bit extra money to do that. That's when the art of the politics comes back into play. Real quickly. In the public sector, these are your major institutional entities. All relating to one another. We talk about, doesn't that look like systems connecting with one another? Sure it does. Legislature, the executive, the agency, and the clientele. Oh, by the way, really nice to have a politically active, politically powerful clientele. And so part of the art of budgeting is, in fact, identifying and cultivating such clientele who can then be advocates, not just on behalf of themselves, but on behalf of the agency. In the private sector, board of directors, agency, and clientele are your major institutional actors. So again, as basic strategies, cultivate an active clientele. And historically in social work, this is one of the reasons why we have been as politically ineffective as unfortunately we've been. So many of our clientele are people who are disenfranchised. They are among the pariah groups in the culture. They are not valued, and they are not politically powerful. So, what are alternatives? Develop confidence in other officials. And what I mean by that is develop their respect as best you can. Develop for yourself an aura, one hope, legitimate, of competence in this. Competence and integrity. And employ strategies. I again refer you to Wadowski's book. Because Wadowski does the best job I know of identifying and describing a wide variety of strategies that one could use. Now I'm just going to give you one. And then that's going to be it for tonight. Some people refer to this particular technique as the salami technique. You have a salami, how do you eat? Stay cool with it. How do you eat it, right? You throw it all in your mouth at one time? No, you don't, right? You slice it, don't you? Slice at a time, slice at a time, slice at a time. There's another approach to this, another term for this. It's called the camel's nose. The camel's nose. There's an old adage, apparently it comes out of the Middle East, that on a cold desert night, if a camel gets so much as his or her nose under the tent, it's just a matter of time before you're sleeping with a camel. All right? Now, taking it positively, the notion here is look at budgeting as repetitive, all right, as a multi-year event. If you're after a chunk of money, let's say $1 million, and you think of budgeting as an incremental process, might it be unwise to ask for $1 million right away, particularly for, let's say, for a program that's an experimental program? Why not frame a program as a modification of an existing program, an extension of an existing program, right? And all we need for this is $50,000 more over what we are already budgeted. So slice one, right? That's the camel's nose. Because next year, guess what? You're going to come back and ask for an additional $100,000 over what you've been given the previous year because you want to expand the program in this direction. And guess what? Next year, having now sliced off that second piece of the salami and now finding that you're sharing your tent, not just with a nose, but with a head and a third of a neck of a camel, you're going to come back and ask for an additional $200,000 because there's a fantastic opportunity, just fantastic opportunity, to go ahead and expand, and alter this program a little bit more to meet the additional need and to garner significant support for the agency. Chop, 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 chop. Okay. Neat. Just another one? How about where you decide that you're going to bury costs? If in fact you can move some of these monies around from line item to line item within categories, right? Or from program to program, the library has 5 different programs but has one administrative assistant. Where are you going to put the one administrative assistant's primary responsibility in terms of which program is supported? Well, if 3 of your 5 members of your board of directors are women with large families who love kids, I'm going to guess that 80% of my administrative assistant's time goes into building the children's library. Now, a close audit might show that she's only spending 10% of her time there, right? But nobody's done a close audit. And if they ask me, I might forget. But I'll have integrity in forgetting. I leave it up to you to decide how that's done. All right? See you next week.